A powerful prayer about Jeremiah 29. My friends, today I want to guide you through one of the most profound promises of the Bible, Jeremiah 29:11. Many of you know this verse by heart. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. The idea that God's plans are intentional is a cornerstone of faith for many, rooted in the profound reassurance found in Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. This verse is not just a comforting statement, but a declaration of God's character and His sovereignty over our lives. It tells us that nothing about our existence is random, and everything has a purpose that aligns with a divine blueprint crafted by the Creator Himself. When we reflect on this, it calls us to consider the depth of intention behind every moment, decision, and event in our lives. God's intentionality means that He sees the entire picture when we can only see fragments. Like an artist working on a grand masterpiece, each stroke, color, and detail is deliberate, even if it looks chaotic or meaningless in the moment. Our lives, filled with joys and sorrows, successes and failures, are part of this larger masterpiece. God's perspective is infinite, while ours is limited to the here and now. This is why trusting His plan requires faith, as we may not always understand His methods or timing. Yet His word assures us that His plans are to prosper us, not harm us. Even in moments of struggle or confusion, we can find peace in the knowledge that God's intentions are rooted in His love for us. One of the most challenging aspects of this belief is reconciling God's intentional plans with the difficulties and pain we experience. How can we trust that there is purpose in suffering? The answer lies in understanding that God's plans are not always about immediate comfort, but ultimate good. Pain can be transformative. It shapes us, strengthens us, and prepares us for what lies ahead. Just as a gardener prunes a plant to encourage growth, God may allow challenges to refine us, ensuring we are ready for the blessings and responsibilities He has in store. Every trial has the potential to teach us lessons, deepen our character, and draw us closer to Him. God's intentionality also calls us to live with purpose. If God has a plan for our lives, it means we are not accidents or afterthoughts. We were created with intention, designed uniquely to fulfill a role that no one else can. This truth should inspire us to seek His will actively and align our actions with His purposes. Living intentionally means we do not waste the gifts, opportunities, and time God has given us. It means embracing our calling, however big or small it may seem, and trusting that even the mundane tasks of life have meaning in His greater plan. Prayer plays a crucial role in understanding and aligning with God's intentionality. When we pray, we open our hearts to His guidance and wisdom. Prayer is not just about asking for what we want, but seeking what He wants for us. It is a dialogue that helps us discern His direction and align our desires with His purpose. In Jeremiah 29:12-13, God promises that when we call on Him and come to Him in prayer, He will listen. When we seek Him with all our hearts, we will find Him. This invitation to connect with God reminds us that His plans are not distant or detached. He is actively involved in our lives, walking with us every step of the way. Another aspect of God's intentional plans is their inclusivity. His plans are not just for our individual lives, but for the collective good of His people. In Jeremiah 29, God was speaking to the Israelites as a community, assuring them of His plans for their future, even as they faced exile. This communal aspect reminds us that our lives are interconnected. God's plan for one person often intersects with His plan for another, creating a tapestry of relationships and events that fulfill His purposes on a larger scale. This interconnectedness calls us to consider how our actions and decisions impact others, and how we can be instruments of His plans in their lives. Faith in God's intentionality also requires patience. Jeremiah 29 was written to people in exile, and God's promise of restoration was not immediate. They were told to settle in, build homes, plant gardens, and pray for the prosperity of the city where they were living, even though it was not their ultimate destination. This teaches us that waiting is often part of God's plan. While we may long for quick answers or immediate resolutions, God works on a different timeline, one that is perfect even when it feels slow to us. During the waiting, we are called to trust Him, to be faithful in the present, and to prepare for the future He has promised. Living with the assurance of God's intentional plans transforms how we approach life's uncertainties. It gives us hope when circumstances seem bleak, reminding us that there is always a purpose behind the pain. It gives us confidence to pursue our calling, knowing that we are equipped and guided by Him. It encourages us to seek Him continually, trusting that His guidance will lead us to the best possible outcomes. Most importantly, it deepens our relationship with Him as we learn to rely on His wisdom, trust His timing, and embrace His love. Jeremiah 29:11 is not just a promise, it is an invitation. An invitation to trust that our lives matter, that every moment is significant, and that God is in control. It challenges us to live intentionally, to align our hearts with His, and to find peace in the assurance that His plans are always for our good. Even when we cannot see the road ahead, we can walk forward in faith, knowing that the one who created the universe is also crafting our story with care, purpose, and infinite love. In the end, His intentionality is not just about the plans He has for us, but about the relationship He desires to have with us, guiding us into the hope and future He has promised. Hope in exile is a theme that resonates deeply within the human experience, and it is profoundly captured in Jeremiah 29. The people of Israel, to whom this passage was addressed, were living in Babylonian exile. Their lives had been upended, they were far from home, their temple was destroyed, and their dreams for the future seemed crushed. In the midst of their despair, God sent a message through the prophet Jeremiah, one filled with both challenge and comfort. This message speaks not only to the Israelites, but to anyone who has ever felt lost, displaced, or uncertain about what comes next. It reminds us that even in the darkest moments, there is a glimmer of hope, anchored in God's promises and presence. Exile, whether literal or metaphorical, is a state of being that many can relate to. It is the feeling of being removed from what is familiar, comfortable, and secure. It is the experience of being in a place that feels foreign, where nothing seems to align with our expectations or desires. For the Israelites, exile meant being separated from their homeland and from the center of their worship, the temple in Jerusalem. For us, exile can take the form of a personal crisis, a loss, or a season of waiting where our circumstances seem to contradict the promises of God. It is in these moments that hope can feel distant and questions about God's faithfulness can begin to arise. In Jeremiah 29, God's message to the exiled Israelites begins with a surprising instruction to settle in, build houses, plant gardens, marry, and have children. This was not the response they were hoping for. They wanted immediate deliverance, a quick return to their homeland, and the restoration of what they had lost. But instead, God called them to embrace the present, even in the midst of their exile. This was a radical act of hope, a declaration that their current situation, no matter how painful, was not the end of the story. It was an invitation to trust that God was still at work, even in Babylon. This act of settling in and building a life in exile teaches us a profound lesson about hope. Hope is not passive, it is active. It is not merely waiting for things to get better, but living with purpose and faith in the present, even when the circumstances are far from ideal. For the Israelites, this meant seeking the prosperity of the city where they were exiled, praying for it, and contributing to its welfare. For us, it means finding ways to thrive, to grow, and to make a positive impact, even when we are in seasons of difficulty or uncertainty. It is about trusting that God can bring beauty and purpose out of any situation, no matter how hopeless it may seem. One of the most comforting aspects of Jeremiah 29 is God's assurance that He has a plan for His people. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. These words were spoken to a people who likely felt abandoned and forgotten. They were a reminder that God's plans were not thwarted by their exile. In fact, their exile was part of His larger purpose, a step in the process of their ultimate restoration and renewal. This teaches us that God's plans often unfold in ways we do not understand. What may look like a detour or a setback is often a necessary part of His work in our lives. Hope in exile also involves seeking God with all our hearts. Later in Jeremiah 29, God promises that when His people seek Him, they will find Him. This is not a superficial seeking, but a wholehearted pursuit, one that requires surrender and trust. In seasons of exile, it can be tempting to turn away from God, to focus on our frustrations, or try to take matters into our own hands. But God invites us to draw closer to Him, to deepen our relationship with Him, and to trust that He is present, even when His plans are not immediately clear. The Israelites' exile was not permanent, and neither are the exiles we experience in our own lives. God's promise to bring his people back to their homeland reminds us that he is a God of restoration. He does not leave us in our brokenness or despair, but works to bring us into a place of healing, renewal, and fulfillment. However, the timing of this restoration is often different from what we expect. The Israelites were told that their exile would last 70 years. This meant that many of them would not see the fulfillment of God's promise in their lifetime. But the promise was no less certain. This teaches us to trust in God's timing and to hold on to hope even when the wait is long. Hope in exile is not just about believing that things will get better someday. It is about finding meaning and purpose in the present, trusting in God's faithfulness, and living with the assurance that he is in control. It is about embracing the truth that God's plans are always for our good, even when we cannot see the full picture. Jeremiah 29 challenges us to live as people of hope, to trust that exile is not the end of the story, and to believe that God is always at work, bringing about his perfect plan. In our own lives, we may face moments that feel like exile times when we are far from where we want to be or when the future feels uncertain. In these moments, Jeremiah 29 reminds us to trust in God's promises, to seek him with all our hearts, and to live with hope, knowing that he is always faithful. Even in exile, there is purpose. Even in exile, there is hope. And even in exile, God is with us, guiding us toward the future he has planned. The promise of a future filled with hope is one of the most reassuring messages in the scriptures. In Jeremiah 29, this assurance is woven into the narrative of a displaced people, offering them a beacon of light in the midst of their uncertainty and despair. This passage, though addressed to the exiled Israelites, resonates universally. It speaks to the human condition, the longing for stability, the need for purpose, and the deep desire for a better tomorrow. God's words in this chapter, plans to give you hope and a future, are not only a declaration of divine intent, but also an invitation to trust in his vision, even when the present feels overwhelming. The Israelites were in Babylonian exile, far removed from their homeland and the familiar structures of their lives. Their situation was bleak, marked by loss and an uncertain future. Yet, in the midst of this hardship, God's promise arrived with an unexpected clarity. It was not a promise of immediate rescue or the eradication of their troubles, but a reassurance that their story was far from over. God's plans, though hidden from their understanding, were in motion, designed to prosper them and not to harm them. This perspective challenges the natural human inclination to view current struggles as definitive. Instead, it frames them as a chapter in a larger narrative, one authored by a God who is both sovereign and good. A future filled with hope does not negate the reality of present challenges. For the Israelites, their exile was real and painful, yet it was also purposeful. God's plans often work in ways that are beyond human comprehension, requiring faith that he is orchestrating events for a greater good. This trust does not come easily, especially when the visible circumstances seem contrary to the promise. However, the promise itself serves as an anchor, a reminder that God's timing and methods are perfect, even when they diverge from human expectations. This assurance of a hopeful future also redefines the concept of prosperity. In Jeremiah 29, prosperity is not solely about material wealth or immediate gratification. It is about flourishing in a way that aligns with God's purpose and design. For the Israelites, this meant building lives in Babylon, seeking the welfare of the city and trusting that their current situation was part of a divine plan. Similarly, the promise of prosperity in our lives may not always look the way we envision. It might involve seasons of waiting, growth, or even hardship, all of which contribute to the ultimate fulfillment of God's plans. The promise also speaks to the transformative power of hope. Hope is not passive, it is an active force that shapes how we approach our circumstances. For the Israelites, God's words encouraged them to live purposefully, even in exile. They were to plant gardens, build homes, and create communities, embodying hope through their actions. This principle applies to us as well. Living with hope means engaging with life fully, trusting that our efforts, no matter how small, contribute to a future that God is crafting. It is a call to persevere, to find joy in the present, and to remain steadfast in the belief that better days are ahead. Trusting in a future filled with hope also involves surrendering control. As humans, we often strive to map out our lives, seeking certainty and predictability. Yet, the promise in Jeremiah 29 reminds us that true security comes from trusting in God's plans rather than our own. This surrender is not a passive resignation, but an active choice to place our faith in the one who sees the end from the beginning. It is about releasing our grip on the need to understand every detail and instead resting in the assurance that God is faithful to His word. The promise of hope and a future also highlights the relational nature of God. He is not a distant deity, but a loving Father who is intimately involved in the lives of His people. His plans are not arbitrary, they are crafted with care, reflecting His deep love and commitment to our well-being. This relational aspect is further emphasized in the invitation to seek Him wholeheartedly. When we seek God, we align ourselves with His vision for our lives, gaining a perspective that transcends our immediate struggles. This seeking is not a one-time act, but a continual process, a journey of growing closer to Him and understanding His heart. The promise in Jeremiah 29 also speaks to the collective aspect of hope. While the message was delivered to a group of exiled Israelites, it reminds us that God's plans often involve community. Our individual futures are intertwined with the lives of others, and our actions contribute to the collective flourishing of the people around us. For the Israelites, this meant praying for the prosperity of Babylon, the very place of their exile. For us, it means recognizing that our hope is not just for personal gain, but for the greater good, for the building of God's kingdom on earth. The beauty of this promise lies in its universality. It transcends time, culture, and circumstance, offering reassurance to anyone who feels lost, uncertain, or weary. It is a reminder that no situation is beyond God's redemption, and that His plans are always for our good. Even when life feels like exile, His promise of hope and a future remains steadfast, calling us to trust, to act, and to persevere. In the midst of life's uncertainties, the promise of a future filled with hope serves as a beacon, guiding us toward God's ultimate purpose. It challenges us to live with faith, to embrace the present, and to trust in a God whose plans are always for our good. It is a promise that sustains us, inspires us, and reminds us that our story is still being written by the author of all things. Seeking God with all your heart is not a mere suggestion. It is an invitation to experience a depth of connection and fulfillment that transcends human understanding. In Jeremiah 29, the promise that you will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart is a profound declaration that speaks to the very essence of our relationship with God. It is a call to wholehearted devotion, a pursuit that requires sincerity, intentionality, and an unwavering commitment to align every part of our being with His presence. The act of seeking God wholeheartedly begins with recognizing the centrality of His presence in our lives. In a world filled with distractions, it is easy to lose sight of the Creator amidst the demands of daily life. Yet this promise serves as a reminder that our ultimate purpose and fulfillment are found in Him. To seek God with all your heart means to prioritize Him above all else, to make Him the foundation upon which every decision, every thought, and every action is built. This pursuit is not about occasional gestures or half-hearted attempts, but about a complete surrender to the journey of knowing Him more deeply. Wholehearted seeking requires vulnerability and authenticity. It is not about presenting a polished version of yourself to God, but about coming to Him as you are broken, flawed, and in need of His grace. God desires an honest relationship with His children, one where we bring our doubts, fears, and struggles before Him without reservation. In doing so, we create space for Him to work within us, transforming our weaknesses into strengths and our uncertainties into unshakable faith. This authenticity is the foundation of true intimacy with God, allowing us to experience His love and presence in profound ways. The process of seeking God also involves intentionality. It is a deliberate choice to carve out time and space in our lives to connect with Him. In a world that constantly vies for our attention, this intentional pursuit may require sacrifice, whether it is setting aside time for prayer, immersing ourselves in His Word, or cultivating an attitude of worship in every aspect of our lives. Seeking God with all your heart means being purposeful in creating opportunities to encounter Him, knowing that these moments of connection are vital for spiritual growth and renewal. This pursuit is not without its challenges. There are moments when God may feel distant, and the act of seeking Him might seem futile. Yet, it is in these moments that our faith is tested and refined. The promise in Jeremiah 29 reminds us that God is not playing a game of hide and seek. His desire is for us to find him, and he assures us that when we seek him wholeheartedly, he will make himself known. This assurance invites us to persevere, even when the journey feels uncertain. It is a reminder that our efforts are not in vain, for God's presence is always near, waiting to be revealed to those who diligently pursue him. Seeking God with all your heart also transforms how we view ourselves and the world around us. As we draw closer to him, our perspective shifts. We begin to see life through the lens of his love, grace, and purpose. This alignment with his will brings clarity to our decisions, peace in the midst of chaos, and hope in the face of adversity. It empowers us to navigate life's challenges with a sense of assurance, knowing that we are not alone and that our steps are guided by a sovereign and loving God. This wholehearted pursuit of God is not only about personal transformation, but also about impact. As we seek him, his presence flows into every area of our lives, influencing our relationships, our choices, and our actions. This ripple effect extends beyond ourselves, touching the lives of those around us. When we live in alignment with God's will, we become vessels of his love, grace, and truth, demonstrating to others the beauty of a life surrendered to him. Our pursuit of God inspires and invites others to embark on their own journey of seeking him. The promise that we will find God when we seek him with all our hearts also underscores his faithfulness. He is not a distant deity indifferent to our efforts. Instead, he is a loving Father who longs to be found by his children. This assurance encourages us to trust in his character and his promises. Even when the path feels uncertain, we can rest in the knowledge that God is constant, unchanging, and ever-present. His willingness to reveal himself to us is a testament to his desire for a relationship that is not based on our perfection, but on his unwavering love. Seeking God with all your heart is ultimately an act of love. It is about responding to his love with a devotion that encompasses every aspect of who we are. It is a journey of drawing closer to him, not out of obligation, but out of a desire to know him more intimately. This pursuit is not about earning his favor, but about aligning ourselves with his presence and purpose. It is a journey marked by trust, surrender, and the expectation of encountering a God who delights in being found by those who seek him. This promise from Jeremiah 29 serves as both an invitation and a guarantee. It invites us into a deeper relationship with God, encouraging us to pursue him with everything we have. At the same time, it guarantees that our efforts will be rewarded, that our seeking will lead to finding, and that our hearts will be satisfied in his presence. It is a reminder that no matter where we are in life, the door to God's presence is always open, and the journey of seeking him is one that will transform us in ways beyond our imagination. Finding God's peace in times of uncertainty is a deeply transformative experience. It is not merely the absence of conflict or worry, but a profound state of assurance and calm that transcends human understanding. In Jeremiah 29, the Israelites faced one of the most uncertain times in their history, exiled in a foreign land, stripped of their home, and left with questions about their future. Yet, amidst this turmoil, God's words to them offered a pathway to peace, not by erasing their challenges, but by guiding them to trust his sovereignty and promises. This divine peace is a gift that remains available to us, even in the most turbulent moments of our lives. The search for peace often begins with a recognition of its necessity. In times of uncertainty, the human mind can become a battlefield of fears, doubts, and anxieties. Our natural response might be to seek control, to try to resolve the chaos through our own efforts. However, peace does not come from eliminating external uncertainties, but from anchoring ourselves in something greater than our circumstances. The peace God offers is not contingent on the resolution of our problems. It is rooted in the assurance of his presence, his plans, and his unchanging nature. This peace begins to take shape when we align ourselves with God's perspective. In Jeremiah 29, the Israelites were instructed to build homes, plant gardens, and seek the prosperity of the city where they were exiled. This directive was not just a call to action, but a reminder that God's plans were unfolding even in their exile. By focusing on their present responsibilities and trusting God's overarching design, they could find stability amidst the unknown. Similarly, finding peace in our lives involves shifting our focus from what we cannot control to what God is calling us to do in the moment. It is about living faithfully in the present, confident that God is weaving all things together for good. The peace of God also requires surrender. In times of uncertainty, it is tempting to cling tightly to our own plans, to resist the changes and disruptions that life brings. However, this approach often leads to frustration and exhaustion. True peace comes when we release our grip on the need to control every outcome and entrust our lives to God's care. Surrendering to God does not mean resigning ourselves to passivity. It means actively choosing to trust that His wisdom and love surpass our understanding. It is an act of faith that opens the door to His peace, allowing it to fill the spaces where fear once resided. Another critical aspect of finding God's peace is the practice of prayer and communion with Him. In Jeremiah 29, God assures the Israelites that they will find Him when they seek Him with all their hearts. This invitation to seek God is a reminder that peace is not something we manufacture. It is a byproduct of intimacy with Him. Through prayer, we bring our worries, doubts, and burdens to God, laying them at His feet and inviting His presence into our lives. This act of seeking creates a connection that grounds us, providing clarity and comfort even in the midst of chaos. It is in these moments of communion that we experience the peace that surpasses all understanding, a peace that guards our hearts and minds in Christ. God's peace is not a fleeting emotion, but a steady state of being that equips us to face life's uncertainties with confidence. It strengthens us to endure challenges, guiding our decisions and interactions with others. This peace does not eliminate hardship, but transforms how we respond to it. Instead of being paralyzed by fear or overwhelmed by doubt, we are empowered to move forward, trusting that God is with us and for us. This sense of assurance becomes a source of strength, enabling us to navigate even the most difficult seasons with grace. Finding peace in God also transforms our relationships. In Jeremiah 29, the Israelites were instructed to seek the peace and prosperity of their city, to pray for it, and to contribute to its well-being. This communal focus reminds us that God's peace is not only for individual comfort, but also for the benefit of others. When we live in God's peace, it overflows into our interactions, allowing us to be peacemakers in a world often marked by division and strife. This outward expression of peace becomes a testimony of God's presence in our lives, drawing others toward Him and His transformative power. The journey to finding God's peace is not without challenges. There are moments when uncertainty feels overwhelming and doubt creeps in. Yet, it is precisely in these moments that the promise of God's peace becomes most significant. His peace is not dependent on our circumstances or our ability to maintain control. It is a gift freely given to those who seek Him. This assurance allows us to rest, even in the midst of turmoil, knowing that we are held by a God who is faithful to His promises. God's peace also redefines our understanding of uncertainty. Instead of seeing it as something to fear or avoid, we begin to view it as an opportunity to trust Him more deeply. Uncertainty becomes a space where faith grows, where we learn to rely not on our understanding but on His guidance. It is in these moments of uncertainty that God's peace shines brightest, reminding us that His plans for us are good, that He is with us, and that His love is steadfast. The peace of God is a profound gift that transforms our hearts and minds, enabling us to live with confidence and hope regardless of our circumstances. It is a peace that surpasses human understanding, rooted in the assurance of His presence and the promise of His plans. In times of uncertainty, this peace serves as an anchor, grounding us in the unshakable reality of God's love and faithfulness. As we seek Him, surrender to Him, and trust in His care, we find a peace that not only sustains us but also empowers us to thrive, even in the midst of life's greatest uncertainties. Hope anchored in God's promises is a powerful force that sustains us through the trials and uncertainties of life. When life feels chaotic, when the future seems unclear, or when the weight of present struggles becomes overwhelming, hope grounded in His promises provides an unshakable foundation. This hope is not a fleeting emotion or mere optimism. It is a steadfast assurance rooted in the character of God and the certainty of His word. In Jeremiah 29, God speaks to a displaced and discouraged people, offering them a future filled with hope. His promises to them echo into our lives today, reminding us that even in our darkest moments, we can cling to the hope that He is faithful to fulfill what He has declared. Hope begins with understanding who God is. His character is the bedrock of our confidence. He is a loving Father, a faithful provider, and an unchanging anchor in a constantly shifting world. The promises found in Scripture reflect His nature. When He declares plans to prosper us, not to harm us, but to give us a future filled with hope, it is a reflection of His goodness and intentional care. Our hope is not based on circumstances or fleeting assurances from others, but on the eternal, trustworthy nature of God. This understanding transforms the way we view life's challenges, as we come to see them not as insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities for His promises to unfold. Holding on to hope requires us to look beyond what we see. In difficult times, it is easy to focus on the immediate pain or uncertainty and lose sight of the bigger picture. However, God's promises invite us to lift our eyes, to trust that what we see is not all there is. Hope is forward-looking, grounded in the assurance that God is at work, even when we cannot see it. In Jeremiah 29, the Israelites were told to settle into their current circumstances while trusting in God's plans for their future. This balance of living faithfully in the present while holding on to future promises is at the heart of hope. It requires a willingness to believe that God is weaving a story far greater than we can comprehend. Hope anchored in God's promises also requires patience. The fulfillment of His promises does not always come in the timing we expect or desire. For the Israelites, the promise of restoration came with the reality of a waiting period. Similarly, in our own lives, there are times when the waiting feels long and doubts begin to creep in. Yet it is in these seasons of waiting that hope grows. Patience is not passive resignation, it is active trust. It is choosing to believe that God's timing is perfect, even when it challenges our understanding. This patient hope strengthens our faith, teaching us to rely on His wisdom rather than our own desires. Another essential aspect of hope is the recognition that it transforms our perspective. When we anchor our hope in God's promises, we begin to see life's difficulties through a different lens. Challenges become opportunities for growth, and setbacks become stepping stones towards something greater. This perspective shift does not negate the reality of pain or difficulty, but it frames them within the context of God's greater plan. Hope gives us the courage to persevere, to keep moving forward even when the path is uncertain. It is the assurance that no struggle is wasted, that God is using every moment to shape us and lead us closer to His purposes. Hope also equips us to encourage others. When we hold on to God's promises, our lives become a testimony of His faithfulness. Just as the Israelites' restoration served as a demonstration of God's power and love, our own journeys of hope can inspire those around us. By sharing the ways God has fulfilled His promises in our lives, we become instruments of hope for others. This outward expression of hope creates a ripple effect, spreading encouragement and reminding others of the unchanging truth of God's Word. Our hope becomes a beacon of light in a world often overshadowed by despair. Hope is not without its challenges. There are moments when doubts threaten to overshadow our confidence, when the weight of life feels too heavy to bear. Yet it is in these moments that hope becomes most significant. Anchored in God's promises, hope does not depend on our circumstances or emotions. It is a choice, a daily decision to trust in His faithfulness. This active choice to hope is an act of faith that keeps us grounded, allowing us to endure even the most trying times with resilience and grace. God's promises are a source of hope that brings clarity and purpose to our lives. They remind us that we are not alone, that He is with us, guiding and sustaining us through every season. His promises assure us of a future filled with His goodness, even when the present feels uncertain. As we hold on to this hope, we are reminded that our story is part of a larger narrative, one written by a God who is faithful to complete the good work He has begun. This hope is transformative. It changes the way we live, the way we face challenges, and the way we interact with others. It empowers us to walk forward with confidence, knowing that God's promises are sure. Hope does not eliminate the difficulties of life, but it infuses them with meaning and purpose. It anchors us in the truth that God is sovereign, that His plans for us are good, and that His love is unending. Hope anchored in God's promises is a lifeline that sustains us, strengthens us, and propels us forward. It is a reminder that no matter how uncertain life may feel, we are held by a God who is faithful and true. As we cling to His promises, we find the courage to navigate life's challenges, the patience to wait for His timing, and the joy of knowing that He is at work in every detail of our lives. This hope is not just for our own comfort, but a gift we share with the world, pointing others toward the unshakable truth of God's faithfulness.